Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into the myth of the marshmallow and exploring why willpower is actually, well, environmental. Today, we are unpacking one of the absolute most culturally ingrained legends in the entire history of psychology. So think about it. Does one single marshmallow actually predict your whole life? I mean, it sounds totally absurd when you ask it out loud, right? But for decades, this was treated as settled fact. It all goes back to the late 1960s at Stanford University. Picture this. A 4-year-old sits down at a table, and right in front of them on a plate sits a single marshmallow. The researcher explains the deal. They can eat this one treat right now, or if they just wait 15 minutes until the adult comes back, boom, they get 2 marshmallows. The adult leaves, and the kid is just left agonizing. We've all seen the footage, kids squirming around, covering their eyes, literally sitting on their hands just trying to fight the temptation. Some grab it immediately, and others manage to hold out. And from that agonizing wait, an entire cultural narrative was born. Let's call it the willpower gospel. The story went that you could supposedly read a child's entire life trajectory off a preschooler before they could even, read a sentence. The kids who waited, they were the winners. Supposedly, they grew up to have higher test scores, better jobs, healthier bodies, just superior discipline across the board. And the kids who grabbed the treat early, well, they were labeled impulsive and pretty much doomed to struggle. One test, one marshmallow, and your whole life was supposedly decided at just 4 years old. Now, the spark that turned this lab result from a quiet study into an absolute legend comes down to one absolutely staggering number: 210. See, the researcher, Walter Mischel, and his colleagues didn't just test these kids and forget about them. Years later, they tracked down the children, who were teenagers by then, and checked how they were doing. And the numbers were just wow. The adolescents who had waited the longest as preschoolers scored, on average, 210 points higher on their SATs. 210 points. That is a massive gap. And it was the exact spark that ignited an absolute firestorm of public interest. From those SAT scores, an entire willpower industry was basically born overnight. The concept spread like wildfire. Mischel himself actually wrote a best-selling book literally called The Marshmallow Test, Mastering Self-Control. Schools started building entire curriculums around teaching grit. Corporate training programs ate it up. And parents everywhere? They watched their own kids hesitate over a cookie and quietly panicked that their child was somehow destined for mediocrity. It was a really beautiful, empowering idea, honestly, because it told a story we all desperately wanted to hear, that success isn't about luck or money or where you were born. It's just about character. It puts your destiny right back in your own hands. So the story is neat, it's tidy, and it's incredibly empowering. But actually scratch that. There is a massive hidden flaw sitting right in plain sight of the original study. It's a flaw that requires us to stop and ask a really basic question. Who exactly were these children sitting in that room? Check out this stark contrast here. The original 1960s test was conducted at the Bing Nursery School. These were the sons and daughters of Stanford professors, graduate students, and university staff. I mean, they were kids growing up on literally one of the most elite university campuses on Earth. And that famous follow-up with the SAT scores, it tracked down fewer than 100 of them. So from a tiny sample size of roughly 90 kids from one of the most comfortable, privileged corners of America, the world just decided it had discovered a universal law of human nature. You simply cannot measure the effect of a hard childhood in a room where nobody actually had one. Fast forward to 2018, and researchers Tyler Watts, Greg Duncan, and Ha-Nun Kwan finally replicated the study at real scale. They tested around 900 kids spanning a massive range of incomes, races, and home environments. And this 2018 replication did one absolutely crucial thing that completely changed the game. They rebuilt the test to actually be fair by factoring in the reality of these children's lives. They accounted for family income. They accounted for the parents' level of education. They even accounted for the stability of the home environment itself. Basically, they looked at the child's entire world, not just the single marshmallow sitting on the plate. So here is the kicker. What happened to the results when those real-world environmental factors were applied? The magic just melted away. The link between waiting for the treat and later success was technically still there, but it was just a whisper of what we originally thought, only about half the size. But more importantly, once you factored in the child's actual background, waiting for the marshmallow barely predicted anything about their future on its own. What the test actually tracked all those years wasn't raw willpower, it tracked where the child came from. To really wrap our heads around why, we have to look at this brilliant 2013 experiment out of the University of Rochester. They wanted to know why some kids grabbed the treat immediately. So before the marshmallow test even started, an adult sat down with a child to do an art project and made a really simple promise. Wait here and I'll bring you better art supplies. Now for half the kids, the adult returned and kept the promise. But for the other half, the adult lied. They returned empty-handed and just said, "Oops, I made a mistake." And only after this little trust exercise did they bring out the famous marshmallow. The results brilliantly illustrate what's actually going on here. Same marshmallow, same room, same age group, but the kids who learned the adult was reliable, they waited an incredible average of 12 minutes. But the children who learned the adult was a liar, they waited only about 3 minutes. That is 4 times the patience generated by absolutely nothing other than one single lesson on whether a grown-up actually keeps their word. Which brings us to a really fascinating concept called rational impulsivity. For years, society looked at the kid who grabbed the marshmallow early and branded them as weak or impulsive or lacking character. But think about a child who has been promised things 100 times, only to watch those rewards just turn to dust. A toy that never came, a parent who promised to be there but wasn't. To that child, a stranger in a lab coat promising a second marshmallow in 15 minutes is just another adult who probably won't deliver. Taking the marshmallow right now isn't a crack in their character. It is a highly logical, completely rational survival tactic in an unreliable world. It's the only guaranteed win in the room. When we compare these two lived environments, everything about those kids in that room starts making sense. The child who looks disciplined and waits patiently, they usually come from a safe, predictable home. Their parents keep promises, there's money, there's time, and it's a calm environment where dinner always shows up exactly when it's supposed to. But the child we so hastily labeled as weak, they've often lived a life where good things are incredibly precarious. Here right now, but totally gone by morning. The gap in their reaction times was mostly written long before they ever sat down at that table. And here is the profound, kind of uncomfortable conclusion we have to face. We took an environmental gap, and we called it character. This is the quiet trick sitting underneath the entire willpower story we've been sold for decades. By pretending it's all about innate grit, it allows comfortable people to believe their comfort is just a prize for being morally strong. And conversely, it allows society to look at someone who is struggling and decide, well, they simply didn't want it badly enough. We literally mistook a safe childhood for discipline. And importantly, this dynamic totally doesn't end when childhood does. The exact same logic follows us right into adulthood, especially when it comes to our finances. When you see someone spend their last few dollars on something immediate, instead of, say, putting it into a savings account, it is so easy, from the outside, to just call it bad discipline. But what if your environment constantly teaches you that savings just get wiped out, whether by an unexpected medical emergency, a cascading series of unavoidable late fees, or just crises entirely beyond your personal control? If your lived experience proves that money saved is just money lost to the next disaster, well then enjoying that money while you physically hold it is actually the most rational move. Because ultimately, patience is just a bet on the future. Waiting for the second marshmallow or leaving money sitting in a savings account requires you to truly trust that the future will actually arrive as promised. You can only place a bet on the future if someone, or society as a whole, has handed you a future that actually feels steady enough to bet on. I want to pause on this quote from our source material for a second because it really captures the heart of this entire explainer perfectly. Mostly, that marshmallow was never a window into the child. It was a mirror for the home standing behind them. Somewhere in that 1960s experiment was a 4-year-old who looked at an adult, decided the promise wasn't worth trusting, and just took the sure thing. We called them a failure. But honestly, they might have just been the most honest, realistic judge in the entire room. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought. The next time you watch someone reach for the immediate reward, whether it's a treat, a sudden purchase, or a major life choice, and you feel that easy, familiar flicker of judgment about their lack of discipline, try to hold it back for just a second. Ask yourself, what has the world already taught them about waiting? Some of us were handed a world we could safely trust. The rest were handed every reason not to. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you next time.